Hello, hello! Pizza Packs here, and we are getting ready to open our case of the commander decks from Fallout. So let's get into here, and we'll also do our first deck today. All right. Yeah. All right. This is also the first time that I've even seen these decks. Let's see what we got. We've got Hail Caesar. Scrappy Survivors. Oh, it's a good boy. We've got Science! Yes, and it's Jeskai. Of course it is. And Sultai is Mutant Menace. Is that Mothman? I think that's the Mothman. Hail the Mothman. Alright, let's see. What's the first one we should do? Well... they all have red and they all have white, except for the Mothman one. That's just blue, black, or green. That's funny. Oh, I didn't notice that. And this is the three colors that each of these don't share. Oh, that's neat. Let's start with Mutant Menace. Such an intimidating deck name. All right. Let's switch over to the document cam so we can get a nice clean look at it. Very nice. Let's see, how do these open? Let's see, I see perforations on the side. Oh, there we go. Perforations on the top and the sides. Right, so we should get like a zipper effect. There we go. Very nice. And it just folds flat. All right, so we've got a deck box. Oh, nice themed deck box with the Mothman on it. This is black, green, blue. Fold that together. It did get a little warped, but that's fine. That always happens with these Universes Beyond Commander decks anyway. Got the deck kind of shoved in here in a funny way. This one looks like it got a little tossed up. Yep. Oh yeah, one of our counters got punched out. Interesting. Okay. So we got that. We've got 8 +1/+1 counters on this thing. Little Pip Boy there. Let's see, toss that. Got our deck. Got our little fold up thing. And then the sleeve of goodness. Is there a die or something in here? No. No, it is not. Just a strange way of folding that. All right, and here we have our Collector Booster Sample Pack. This one seems to be a little worse for wear. We will be opening all of these in their own video. So there will be 16 of those coming in at the end of the week. And hey, we're back to the themed life counters. That's nice. Very cool. All right. And our insert. Oh, they decided to take this one vertical instead of horizontal. So we've got a little thing about the Wise Mothman. Apparently that is what it's called. The Master Transcendent. Okay. And then an overview of the colors and what their representation of the color pie is. And then why are the Wise Mothman and the Master black, green, blue aligned. I like that that has that little explanation there. On the back side of our insert, we have an overview of playing the deck. Reminder that this is from Fallout. And then an overview of the rules for Commander. Overall, nice little insert. But we're here for the star of the show, which is the deck. So I will try my best to keep this in frame, but we are zoomed in pretty far. So I may slip out of frame every now and then. Come on. I see where you guys cut the little starter there, but it's not wanting to tear there. Come on. Come on. There we go. This is not wanting to cooperate today. There we go. All right. So let's focus that in. All right. So the face commander that we have is the Wise Mothman. 1 black, green, blue for a 3/3. Legendary insect mutant with flying. And whenever the Wise Mothman enters the battlefield or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. Whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. Cool. I don't entirely know what a rad counter is yet, but we will see. Then the Master Transcendent. So the same cost, 1 black, green, blue for a 2/4 legendary artifact creature, mutant. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters. Tap, put target creature card in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control. It's a green mutant with base power and toughness 3/3. It loses its other colors and creature types. Okay. We have Vexing Radgall. 1 in a blue for a 1/2 bird mutant with flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player gains 2 rad counters. If they don't have any rad counters, otherwise proliferate. Okay, so proliferate is choose any number of permanents and or players, then give them each another counter of each kind already there. I'm not sure it's necessarily each kind. I do believe you can choose specific counters to increase or not. But I could be wrong there. Bloatfly Swarm. Man, words are hard sometimes. 3 in a black for a 0/0 insect mutant with flying. When it enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it, if damage would be dealt to it, while it has a +1/+1 counter on it, prevent that damage and then remove that many +1/+1 counters from it. Then give each player a rad counter for each +1/+1 counter removed this way. Okay. Infesting Radroach. 2 in a black for a 2/2 flying insect mutant. It can't block. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they gain that many rad counters. Whenever an opponent mills a non-land card, if it's in your graveyard, you may return it to your hand. Okay. Cathedral Acolyte. 1 in a green for a 1/2 human cleric. Each creature you control with a counter on it has Ward 1. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 1. Tap, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that entered the battlefield this turn. Glowing One, 2 in a green for a 2/2 zombie mutant with Death Touch. When it deals combat damage to a player, they get 4 rad counters. Whenever a player mills a non-land card, you gain a life. That's pretty cool. Lumbering Mega Sloth. 10 green for an 8/8 sloth mutant. It costs 1 less to cast for each counter among players and permanents. Trample, it enters the battlefield tapped. Contaminated Drink. X blue-black instant. Draw X cards, then you get half X rad counters rounded up. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not sure why you would want rad counters. I guess for self-mill, but we haven't seen a whole lot of self-mill synergy yet. Nightkin Ambusher. 2 blue-black for a 4/4 mutant warrior with ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, target player gets 4 rad counters. It can't be blocked as long as defending player has a rad counter. Oh, that's pretty sweet. Raul, Troubleshooter. 1 blue-black for a 1/4 legendary zombie mutant rogue. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from among the cards in your graveyard that were milled this turn. Tap, each player mills a card. Very cool. Young Deathclaws. 2 black-green for 4/2 lizard mutant with menace. Can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. Each creature card in your graveyard has Scavenge. The Scavenge cost is equal to its mana cost. Exile a creature card from your graveyard and pay its mana cost. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to that card's power on target creature. Scavenge only as a sorcery. So if you have a Phyrexian Dreadnought in your graveyard, that is 1 mana to put 12 +1/+1 counters on something. Yeah, that's a little clearer. All right, we have Strength Bobblehead, a 3/3 artifact bobblehead. Tap, add 1 mana of any color, and then 3 in tap. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of bobbleheads you control. Activate only as a sorcery. Cultivate. 2 and a green, sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic lands. Reveal those cards, put 1 in your hand, the other on the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle. Farseek. 1 and a green, sorcery. Search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle. Keep in mind this grabs duels and triomes, as long as they have the appropriate type. Harmonize. 2 green, sorcery. Draw 3 cards. Inspiring Call. 2 and a green, instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. This is a very, very nice way to keep your team alive and draw a whole bunch of cards. Rampant Growth. This is actually where we get the term ramp from in Magic. 1 and a green, sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle. Corpsejack Menace. 2 black-green for 4/4 fungus. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. Very nice, especially with the Scavenge that we had on there, or on an earlier card. Putrefy. This is one of my favorite removal spells of all time. It was originally printed in, I believe it was Ravnica City of Guilds, way back in the mid-2000s. But 1 black-green, instant, destroy target artifact or creature. It cannot be regenerated. That used to be relevant text, because regeneration used to actually be printed on cards. Hasn't been printed on anything in quite a while. Winding Constrictor. Black-green for a 2/3 snake. If 1 or more counters would be put on an artifact or a creature you control, that many +1 of each of those kinds of counters is put on that permanent instead. If you would get 1 or more counters, you get that many +1 of each of those kinds of counters instead. One of the downsides of this card is if one of your opponents is playing Infect, you get extra poison counters. Be aware of that. Arcane Signet. 2 mana artifact, taps for your commander's color identity. Contagion Clasp. 2 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. 4 tap proliferate. This used to be a fantastic control card back in I think it was either Scars of Mirrodin or New Phyrexia. Soul Ring. 1 mana artifact, taps for 2. We all know what Soul Ring does by now, but always good to cover it. Talisman of Curiosity. It is the green-blue talisman, which is 2 mana artifact, taps for colorless, and then taps for a green or a blue, and it deals 1 damage to you. Talisman of Dominance, same thing, but black and blue. Then Talisman of Resilience, again, same thing, but black and green. Ash Barrens, a Pauper All-Star. Also not so bad in Commander. It's a land that taps for a colorless and has basic land cycling for 1. So this lets you fix your colors whenever you need to. Command Tower. Taps for your commander's color identity. It's in every commander deck. We all know what this does by now. Evolving Wilds. It's a land that taps, or you tap and sacrifice it to search for a basic, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Jason Bright. Glowing Prophet. 2 and a blue for a legendary zombie mutant advisor. Whenever a zombie or mutant you control dies, if its power was different from its base power, draw a card. Come fly with me. 2, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains flying until end of turn. Mirelurk Queen. 4 and a blue for a 4/4 crab mutant with vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 red counters. Whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, draw a card. Then put a +1/+1 counter on Mirelurk Queen. This ability triggers only once each turn. So it also triggers on your opponent's turn. Don't forget about that. Piper Wright. Public Reporter. 1 and a blue for a 1/2 legendary human detective. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, investigate that many times. Investigate is create a clue token. It's an artifact with 2, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Rad Storm. It is the raddest of storms. But 3 and a blue. Instant. Storm. We have not seen this mechanic printed on a new card in quite some time. I think Modern Horizons was the last one where we had a new card with Storm. But when you cast a spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. Proliferate. That could be very silly, very easily. Struggle for Project Purity. 3 and a blue. Enchantment. As it enters the battlefield, choose Brotherhood or Enclave. Brotherhood. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. You draw a card for each card drawn this way. Enclave. Whenever a player attacks you with 1 or more creatures, that player gets twice that many rad counters. So, either a defensive card or a huge draw engine. Feral Ghoul. 2 and a black for a 2/2 zombie mutant with menace. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Feral Ghoul. Whenever Feral Ghoul dies, each opponent gets a number of rad counters equal to its power. Hancock, Ghoulish Mare. 2 and a black for a 2/1 legendary zombie mutant advisor. Each other creature you control that's a zombie or mutant gets +X/+X, where X is the number of counters on Hancock. Ghoulish Mare, and then Undying. When this creature dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So keep in mind, if you have a way of giving out -1/-1 counters, you can remove +1/+1 counters to just keep bringing him back. Nuclear Fallout. X black sorcery. X black sorcery. Each creature gets twice -X/-X until end of turn. Each player gets X rad counters. Rad. I'm gonna make that joke too many times today. I can already see it. Screeching Scorch Beast. 4 black for a 5/5 bat mutant with flying and menace. Whenever it attacks, each player gets 2 rad counters. Whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, you may create that many 2/2 black zombie mutant creature tokens. Do this only once each turn. Vault 12, the Necropolis. 4 black for a 3-chapter saga, or enchantment saga. Chapter 1, each player gets 3 rad counters. Chapter 2, create X 2/2 black zombie mutant creature tokens, where X is the total number of rad counters among players. Wow, okay. So by default, in a 4-player game, that's 12 2/2s on Chapter 2. And then Chapter 3, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. that's a zombie or a mutant. Okay, I could see that being real silly real fast. Harold and Bob, first Newmans. 2 and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature, Treefolk Mutant with Vigilance and Reach. When Harold and Bob, first Newman, dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with Enchant Forest you control, and Enchanted Forest has tap. Add 3 mana of any one color. You get 2 red counters. Harold and Bob loses all other abilities. Okay. Lily Bowen, Raging Grandma. 3 and a green for a 0/0 legendary mutant warrior with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of +1/+1 counters on Lily Bowen if its power is 16 or less. Otherwise, remove all but one +1/+1 counter from it. Then you gain 1 life for each +1/+1 counter removed this way. So the biggest this can get is a 30/30. Or no, 32/32. If its power is exactly 16 when that happens. I guess you could make it bigger if you have something to give it -X -O. That's interesting. Power Fist, 1 and a green, for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Equip 2. Rampaging Yao Guai. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. X green for a 2/2 bear mutant with Vigilance and Trample. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy any number of target artifacts and or enchantments with total mana value X or less. Strong, the Brutish Thespian. 4 green for a 7/7 legendary creature mutant berserker with Ward 2 and Enrage. Whenever Strong is dealt damage, you get 3 red counters and put 3 +1/+1 counters on Strong. You gain life rather than lose life from radiation. Okay. Tato Farmer. Okay. 2 and a green for a 1/4 creature zombie mutant peasant with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may get 2 red counters. Tap, put target land card from your graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control tapped. Tato Farmer. Watchful Radstag. 2 and a green for a 2/2 elk mutant with Evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever Watchful Radstag evolves, create a token that's a copy of it. Wow. That's a little silly. Agent Frank Horrigan. 5 black-green for an 8/6 legendary mutant warrior with trample. It has indestructible as long as it attacked this turn. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, proliferate twice. Very nice. Alpha Deathclaw. 4 green-black, or black-green rather, for a 6/6 lizard mutant with menace and trample. It enters the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield or becomes monstrous, destroy target permanent. 5 green-black, monstrosity 4. If this creature isn't monstrous, put 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. Nice. Atomize. 2 black-green, instant. Destroy target non-land permanent. Proliferate. Marcus, mutant mayor. 3 green-blue for a 4/4 legendary creature, Mutant Advisor, with Vigilance and Trample. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card if that creature has a +1/+1 counter on it. If it doesn't, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Very nice. Mutational Advantage. 1 green-blue instant. Permanents you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to those permanents this turn. Proliferate. Very nice. Vault 87, Forced Evolution. So 3 green-blue for a 3-chapter enchantment saga. Chapter 1, gain control of target non-mutant creature for as long as you control Vault 87. Chapter 2, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It becomes a mutant in addition to its other types. Chapter 3, draw cards equal to the greatest power among mutants you control. Nuka Nuke Launcher. What? Nuka Nuke. 2 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has Intimidate. Well, yeah, that would be intimidating. It can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. Whenever equipped creature attacks until the end of defending player's next turn, that player gets 2 rad counters whenever they cast a spell. Wow, that could be pretty powerful. Equip 3. Recon Craft Theta. It's a 4 mana artifact vehicle. It's a 4/4 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 blue alien creature token, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever Recon Craft Theta attacks, proliferate. Crew 2. That's a fun one. Mariposa Military Base. Land. You may have it enter the battlefield tapped. If you do, you get 2 rad counters. Tap, add a colorless. 5, tap, draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each rad counter you have. Okay. Overflowing Basin is a filter land that turns a colorless into green-blue. Viridescent Bog. I don't remember Overflowing Basin or Viridescent Bog being printed. I remember the allied colored ones, but I don't remember enemy colored ones being printed. These might be new. Viridescent Bog. Filter land for black-green. Fraying Sanity. This recently had a reprint with, I believe it was Wilds of Eldraine on the bonus sheet. But 2 and a blue for an enchantment or a curse. Enchant player. At the beginning of each end step, enchanted player mills X cards, where X is the number of cards put into their graveyard from anywhere this turn. Inexorable Tide. 3 blue enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell, proliferate. This card, from experience, is always silly. I've yet to see this card land and the person untap and it not be absolutely silly. Branching Evolution, 2 and a green, enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. Guardian Project, 3 and a green, enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. So since we're playing Commander most of the time with this, that should always trigger. Hardened Scales was really great in Modern up until very recently. But for a single green, you get an enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. That is surprisingly tricky to say. Tireless Tracker. 2 and a green for a 3/2 human scout with landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. Biomass Mutation. X hybrid green-blue. Instant. Creatures you control have base power and toughness XX until end of turn. Casualties of War. I really love the new art on this version of Casualties of War. 2, black, black, green, green, sorcery. Choose one or more. Destroy target artifact, creature, enchantment, land, planeswalker. You can choose all 5 modes of this, by the way, which tends to be pretty nasty. Then we have Find and Finality. This was from the same set. I believe so. Hybrid black-green for Find. Sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. And then Finality is 4 black-green sorcery. You may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. Darkwater Catacombs. This is one of the older filter lands. So we've got 3 filter lands here. Drowned Catacombs. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island or swamp. And then taps for a blue and a black. Or a blue or a black, rather. Exotic Orchard. Taps for any color that lands an opponent controls could produce. I always have a hard time saying what this land could do. If your opponent's lands tap for a color, that's what this taps for. Fetid Pools. It is a duel that enters tapped and cycles for 2. It's the blue-black duel that does that. Hinterland Harbor. Let's see. Enters tapped unless you control a forest or island. Taps for a green or a blue. Nesting Grounds. Taps for a colorless. 1 tap, move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. Activate only as a sorcery. Sunken Hollow. Another duel. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. It is an island swamp. Temple of Deceit. It is the blue-black temple. Enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1 and then taps for a blue or black. Temple of Malady, or Temple of Malady. Enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters, you scry 1 and then taps for a black or a green. And Temple of Mystery, same thing, but for green and blue. Woodland Cemetery. This is the fast land, or I guess we call them buddy lands now, but enters tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest, and then taps for a black or a green. Mortuary Mire. Enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, and then taps for a black. Opulent Palace. This was one of the wedge lands. Enters tapped, taps for black, green, or blue. Path of Ancestry. Enters tapped. Tap, add 1 of your commander's color identity. When that's spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with your commander, scry 1. Tainted Isle. Taps for a colorless, and then taps for a blue or black. Activate only if you control a swamp. Tainted Wood. Same thing, but for green. Temple of the False God. Taps for 2 colorless. Activate only if you control 5 or more lands. Terramorphic Expanse. It's functionally the same as Evolving Wilds, but tap, sacrifice, search your library for a basic, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Ooh, we have full art lands now. This is nice. Let's see, we have some full art swamps that are very much Fallout themed. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swamps, and what appears to be 2 different arts. Then we have forests. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forests, also with 2 different arts. Very cool. And then we have some islands. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 islands with 2 different arts. We have the double-sided, extra thick etched foil card for the Wise Mothman. Not a normal playable card, but it is a good stand-in for your commander. Then we have some tokens. We have a 0/0 blue alien that is a clue on the back. We have 3 zombie mutants that are all copies on the back. Very nice. We have another blue alien that is a clue on the back. a zombie mutant. That is a clue on the back. Then we have 4 radiation counters. Or radiation tokens, I guess. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you have any rad counters, mill that many cards. For each non-land card milled this way, you lose 1 life and a rad counter. Okay. That's pretty rad. Then the back are zombie mutants. Very cool. Then we have a Learn to Play Magic scan card. Appears to be an ad, and then the thing that we see in all commander decks at this point, which is a turn order reminder and popular Magic formats. Very cool. Well, thank you for joining me on this adventure into the world of Fallout. With which deck is this again? With Mutant Menace, the black, green, blue deck. So this was a really cool one. I like some of the reprints that they did in this, and I'm looking forward to seeing more things like that. Also, I really like that they went with full art lands. That is something that I've been surprised that they haven't done earlier. So this is really cool. But yeah, as always, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help us out with the algorithm. And until next time, stay awesome. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.